Hi, I'm Ben and I've been gardening all my life. Over the years I've learned the hard way that success in the garden often depends on the planning that takes place before the season even starts. So in this video I'm going to share with you my simple step-by-step process for planning the perfect garden. There are of course a few rules to consider when deciding where everything should go, but get those right and you will set yourself up for success. So let's dive right in. Planning a new vegetable garden is exciting stuff, but first we need to lay the groundwork for the space we have available. It's not just where the beds go that needs considering, the area around them is important too. Choosing the right location for your garden goes a long way to ensuring its success. You want somewhere that gets as much sunshine as possible. At least 8 hours of direct sunshine is ideal, though if the only space you have gets less than this, don't worry, there's still plenty you can grow. If you have the time, it's worth noting where shadows fall on a sunny day, and do this during the summer months as well, because some of the trees overhead will be in leaf then. This way you can get a really accurate idea of which parts of your garden are the sunniest. Soil conditions are just as important. You want somewhere that doesn't get waterlogged in very wet weather or over the winter. And this is where raised beds can come in handy. By raising the planting area up above the surrounding ground level, you're naturally improving the drainage within the bed. You also want to avoid low-lying areas where cold air sinks and collects. Those will be frost pockets. As your garden expands, so too does the importance of being able to easily move about it. Good, clear paths, wide enough to comfortably get a wheelbarrow down, will make life so much easier when it comes to things like watering, weeding, and of course harvesting. Closely tied to path width is bed width. If you can, I'd suggest keeping beds or the growing areas between your paths no wider than 4 foot or 1.2 meters. What that means is you can easily tend to the middle of the bed without ever stepping on the soil, and that will avoid it becoming compacted, which plants won't like. Paths can be bare, laid to grass or even paved. My personal preference is to lay wood chip mulch over an initial sheet of cardboard to keep the weeds down. The wood chips keep the path surface nice and dry, and because they're a natural material, as they break down they will feed the soil and by extension the crops growing around these paths. Wood chips don't need mowing of course, but they will need topping up from time to time, and these paths certainly need topping up quite soon. There are 3 ways to create a garden plan. Level 1 is to sketch out your growing area using old-fashioned paper and pencil. And do use a pencil because you want to be able to erase and redraw things as your design evolves. This is a very tactile process and one that people with an artistic streak will love. Level 2 is where you create a spreadsheet to keep a track of everything with separate rows for each crop. Spreadsheets are still a bit clunky, which is why level 3 is using something like our garden planner. With this method, making changes is a breeze. I can quickly draw out my growing areas as well as add plants to my plan, and it's got handy built-in tools like crop rotation and companion planting features. Any of these methods will work with the garden planning rules I'm about to share. Now for the part we all look forward to, laying out the plants. To help show you how a planting plan translates to the real world, I'm going to show you how I laid out last season's plants. That way, as we move through the garden together, I can show you not only the part of my plan that's relevant to that area, but also clips of how it all turned out. When starting with your planting plan, the first plants to consider are the fussy ones, the frost-sensitive, warm season crops, such as, say, tomatoes or peppers. These need the sunniest spot you can muster and away from any chilly winds. We're talking prime real estate here. My garden gets plenty of afternoon sunshine, so I figured the tomatoes would be good in this bed here. The sun comes from this direction, so there'd be less chance of them overshadowing lower growing crops. Corn also goes towards the back over here, with plants set out in a block formation filling the entire raised bed to encourage better pollination and fuller cobs. Next, it's time to position our climbing or vertically trained crops, which will also cast shade, of course. It's important to be mindful of shade because once these plants are in full leaf, the area behind them will get a lot less direct sunshine. These beautiful arches here form a real centerpiece to my garden, and they're beautiful with beans climbing up them. But I need to be a little bit mindful of the shade that's cast by them once they're in full leaf. And this area here runs the risk of being shaded from some of the midday sun. So in this bed I will place something that prefers the slightly cooler conditions that come with shade, something like broccoli for example. Now if you are in a hot climate, then these shadier areas can be your real friend, proving invaluable for growing cool season crops like leafy salads or spinach. This bed here is shaded for much of the day, but still manages a couple of hours of direct sunshine to help things along. It's the perfect spot for salads, and as well as luscious leaves, I'll be laying out some rows of salad onions, radishes and beets or beetroot. Next up are our sprawling plants, typically also tender crops such as squash, zucchini or courgette, melons or sweet potato. It makes sense to set these sprawlers towards the edge of the plot. This way they can spread out onto surrounding paths, lawn or paving without fear of them smothering less rambunctious crops. With the prime spots taken, it's time to position what's left. Crops such as, say, onions, potatoes and root crops prefer at least 5 hours of sunshine if they can get it, but they will still grow with less than this, just a bit slower. But if your garden is more shade than sunshine, there are plenty of other options too, and we've done a video on that, so do check it out if that is you, link in the description below. Incidentally, the garden planner includes a filter option for shade-tolerant crops. How handy is that? Last summer was hot, which made watering a big job. You can take the strain off watering by growing thirsty crops like celery in an area of the garden that holds soil moisture for longer, or try grouping water-intensive crops together so it's easier to water them in one go. With the outline of the plan in place, now we can start moving crops around to create the perfect plan. Convenience is always worth considering for things like watering and of course harvesting. I like to position crops that will be picked more often closer to the house. This bed here is my herb bed, and it's the bed that's closest to the back door, so I'm more inclined to come out and nab a sprig of aromatic goodness whenever I need it. Other crops to keep close to hand for regular picking might include, say, tomatoes, salad leaves and chard. Don't forget to include plenty of nectar-rich flowers within your vegetable garden. These will attract both pollinators and pest predators such as hoverflies. Last year I planted poached eggplant, calendula and nasturtium along the main path here, and made an effort to tuck in a few flowers within the beds themselves. They added a stunning splash of colour while attracting the sorts of beneficial bugs any gardener would be thrilled to see. If you're seeking inspiration, the garden planner has lots of companion planting ideas, including companion flowers that will make your garden sing. As well as your paths and growing areas, you'll want to make room for a compost heap or bin either within your vegetable garden or at least very close to it. Your garden will generate a lot of compostable material, and all of it can be decomposed to turn into nutrient-rich compost to return to your soil. You'll also want to be close to a water source or somewhere you can install water barrels to collect rainwater. An optional extra is to include somewhere protected to help raise young seedlings and help your tender crops along. A simple cold frame would be great, or if space and budget allow, perhaps a small greenhouse. You needn't spend big bucks. I've seen some fantastic homemade cold frames, and anything that keeps the chill off will really help tender seedlings to make the transition from indoors to out, particularly on those bright spring days when it's sunny but you get those rather chilly nights. And this here is my final garden plan. I think you'll agree it looks rather colourful, but not only that, having this at a glance easy to tweak way of making a plan has honestly transformed the way I garden, meaning I'm getting a lot more from the space I have. If you're interested in trying the garden planner, there's a free 7-day trial. Don't worry, you don't have to put in any payment information, and there's no obligation to continue, of course, once the trial is over. You'll find a link to it in the video description and also the pinned comment below. And while you're there, why not share your experiences of planning your garden? I'll catch you next time.